Hello and welcome to Policy and Politics with me, Tarun Nangia. Our guest today is Mr. Shekar Viswanathan, Vice Chairman of Toyota Kirloskar Motors. He's been associated with the automobile project of Toyota in India since 1999, since its very inception. Today we are going to discuss with him policies and decisions that can unleash the potential of the automobile sector in India, which contributes nearly 8% to the GDP, apart from being the largest employer in the country. Mr. Viswanathan, thank you so much for sparing your time and joining us for this episode of Policy and Politics. You've just attended MOVE, which is a global summit of the automobile sector at Vigyan Bhavan in Delhi. Your first observations and comments.
I think it was a summit that was very well organized by Niti Aayog. We had the opportunity to listen to several CEOs from the automobile sector. We also heard the Prime Minister, and this was followed by several panel discussions on the state of mobility. I think it was very, very well timed, because the whole world is actually changing as far as the automotive sector is concerned. Toyota, for instance, is no more talking about just cars. We talk about not ever better cars, but ever better mobility. So this summit has been well crafted, well designed. I think it gave a lot of food for thought for many of us who attended, and I believe we are the richer for it.
Okay, now I'll take you back to two instances. First, what the Prime Minister said, and what SIAM, which is the Society of Indian Automobile Manufacturers, what the outgoing President said. They both stressed on the need for a stable policy regime, wherein you industrialists, someone like you who would be sitting and planning investments worth thousands of crores, would need to have a decade-long or at least a 7-8-year-long policy stability. What is that the industry is demanding? Could you lay for us in the next 4-5 points that these are the things that we need in order to be able to invest in India?
I think, first of all, the policy framework is woven around 2 or 3 features that the auto industry needs to focus on. One is the pollution levels in our cities. Second is the safety levels, and third is the technology. First of all, with relation to pollution, the government has done a lot. For example, they have mandated that BS6 fuel be introduced from April 1st, 2020, and we're all getting ready to roll out our BS6 vehicles on that date. So that is one thing that the policy framework that we are looking forward to when we say stability. When it says April 1st, 2020, we don't want any delays in the availability of BS6 fuel on that day, and certainly the government doesn't want any delay on the part of the industry in rolling out BS6 vehicles. As far as the safety paradigm is concerned, an Indian life is as valuable as any other life on this planet, and therefore the same global safety standards should be made applicable to the entire auto industry. And that has been Toyota's request to the government, and I believe we are moving decisively forward in that direction. Whether we will achieve global standards immediately or after a certain time frame is very hard for me to tell or predict. But what I can say is that once they announce a certain time frame, the government must stick to that. That way, all automakers can plan their products that they plan to introduce to the marketplace, and therefore the transition from one set of regulations to another set of regulations can be very orderly.
Okay, sir, if I may ask you this, there has been some kind of a confusion whether the date which you mentioned is for manufacture or sale. What would you like it to be, or what would you submit to the government in this regard?
What I would submit to the government, and indeed to my brethren in the industry, would be to stick to April 1st, 2020 as the date of start of manufacture and sale.
Okay.
Now, Some people may choose to start manufacturing from Jan 1, 2020, so that it's available for sale from April 1, 2020. I think that is what the industry needs to follow. However, certain manufacturers may prefer that they start manufacturing only from April 1st,
yes.
2020, and be allowed to sell, let's say, by July 1st, 2020.
Till they exhaust their stocks.
At the moment, I think this is a bit of a storm in a teacup.
Okay.
And I do think that whichever way the final decisions are made, industry can adjust.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Friday promised automobile companies that they will have a stable policy regime to make India a pioneer in electric mobility. Now, I'll also contrast this with what demand the Society of Indian Automobile Manufacturer has. The outgoing president said in his address that we wanted the government to lay out a stable policy regime for us, including issues like charging specifications, battery specifications, charging infrastructure, so that we can plan our investments. But the government has stuck to its tone now. After initially announcing that we are going to have large-scale electric mobility, they have not put a clear path forward. You at Toyota, if you would like to submit to the government in about 3-4 points, what would be your set of requests for the industry?
I think clearly the government is on the right path when they've said that we need to go electric. And even today, the announcements that were made at the Niti Aayog seminar, or at this conference, or at this summit, if you will, very clearly says that we should get electric vehicles which will be powered by non-fossil fuel based energy,
yes.
Meaning from renewable energy, wind and solar. That's the kind of nirvana that we should aim for.
Yes.
And I think we completely agree with that. Now, whether that nirvana can be achieved or not, only time will tell. But the route to achieving that, we believe, is to do it step by step. And the government is also thinking of now fixing 2047 as the date.
2047?
Yeah, because it coincides beautifully with the 100 years of Indian independence.
So, 100% electric by 2047 is what?
I'm not saying it's 100%.
Yes.
I'm not saying it's 30%.
Yes.
I'm not saying it's 15%.
Yes.
This is a detail that will have to be worked out by the government.
Okay.
But at least as a goal, where you can say substantial electrification.
Substantial electrification.
And when I say substantial, the addressable population must have electric vehicles.
Yes.
For example, you can say that all public transportation will be based on electric.
All public transportation.
Yeah, or technology. These are details that have to be spelled out by the government.
Yes.
And I think the discussions over the last 2 days at the MOVE summit has also helped the government clarify its objectives based on what international industry has told them.
Okay. Now the Prime Minister spoke of driving investments across the value chain yesterday, where he said from batteries to smart chargers to electric vehicle manufacturing. Now for this investment to happen seamlessly and to achieve the spelt out target by the government that by 22-23 we should have at least 15% of EV sales happening. What are the 2-3 things that come to your mind that should immediately happen so that you can commit some investment?
I think, first of all, before committing any investment,
yes,
I think we need to understand that in the context of electric vehicles, we have to have a lot of trials done.
A lot of trials done?
Yes. We need to see these become a success in limited pockets in the country.
Which is yet to be done.
Which is yet to be done. We need a few success stories across the country, okay, in different climatic conditions.
Different climatic conditions.
This is important for the success of the electric vehicle.
Okay.
Now, in the interim, what we are suggesting, as we go along this path, in the interim, what we have suggested as Toyota is the advent of hybrid vehicles.
Hybrid vehicles, of which technology you are a pioneer of?
We are a pioneer of that technology. It is not second-hand technology. It is state-of-the-art technology.
Yes.
If there are better forms of hybrid technology, we will certainly deploy that. We have the 4th generation hybrid, strong hybrid technology available.
And how does it benefit?
And it benefits in a number of ways because you don't have to have any immediate investment in charging infrastructure.
No immediate investment?
No investment at all. The onboard battery recharges itself by the kinetic motion of the vehicle. So you will have, for a few seconds or a few minutes, the vehicle run on gasoline.
Yes.
Then it switches over to the battery.
Okay.
Then it runs for a few seconds, few minutes on the battery.
Yes.
Then again it switches back to gasoline. And this process keeps repeating itself. It keeps repeating itself through the driving cycle.
Saves a lot of fuel.
Driving cycle of the vehicle. This, because of this switch on, switch off between gasoline and battery, prolongs the life of the battery.
Prolongs the life?
Yes. And therefore gives you better battery life and battery conditions. It also saves on fuel consumption. Now, you might argue that in certain conditions it saves me only 20% fuel. In certain conditions which we have done, it saves as much as 47%.
47%.
This is also a function of the weight of the vehicle.
Yes.
And the driving conditions.
Yes.
So there are many factors at play.
But we see globally hybrid vehicles have been adopted and celebrated, with Honda introducing the Accord and Toyota pioneering with the Camry, and these are global. Camry is a global success. In India, why didn't we see this adoption? Do you feel that the taxation structure is stifling growth?
Before I get to the taxation structure, I want the listeners to clearly understand that hybrid technology is not only the preserve of Toyota.
Yes.
It's also being adopted and used by Hyundai. It's being used by German car companies, and it's being used by Honda. There may be other car companies who also have access to this technology. So it's not a question of about availability of technology. It is about how you want to deploy it, at what price point you want to deploy it.
Okay.
Now, there are failures in hybrid technology as well.
Yes.
And I think this is largely determined by climatic conditions. Now, we have, for example, run the Camry hybrid under different climatic conditions for the last 3 years.
Okay.
And I'm happy to share with you that it has been an immense success. Not a single failure has been reported.
Okay.
The key element in this is the battery. And if the battery fails, then you can say that the hybrid has failed. But touch wood, after a period of 3 years, I have the confidence to say that despite the dust conditions in India, despite the extreme temperatures in India, the hybrid battery has succeeded. And it is the same hybrid battery which can potentially be used in an electric vehicle going forward. This is the important point.
So we have a very important...
So, to come back to your question about taxation, the reason we price our vehicles a little higher is to take care of all these risks that we run. The risk of battery failure, the risk of consumer non-acceptance, the risk of technical support to it coming up short, because there are a number of things that you've got to get it right. So we typically price it a little higher than normal. And we had a benign tax structure supporting strong hybrids. This was at around 28 to 30% pre-GST. What the GST regime has done is to take this from the 28 to 30% level to 43%.
28 to 43.
Yes.
So we saw how the whole costing of hybrid cars has increased because of taxation, which increased from 28% to 43%. Mr. Viswanathan also shared with us how in the interim, while we adopt electric vehicles, hybrid could be a technology which could be something which would help us transition And globally, I mean, pan-India, if we can save 20% of our energy on each car, that would also lead to huge amount of savings. So it's something that he put out, but we'll take a short break at this juncture and would want to know him more from him after the break. Welcome back. Just before the break, Mr. Viswanathan shared with us the benefits of hybrid technology. We'd like to know something more from him on this. Mr. Viswanathan, we saw that after GST came in, automobile manufacturers were happy, saying that the true potential of the Indian automobile industry, which we know is the 4th largest in the world, on its way to be becoming the 3rd largest in the world by 2021. They said we thought that this will be unleashed because taxation will be 28% GST plus cess of 15%. That takes it to about in the 43% range. And hybrids will benefit hugely. But we didn't see the government giving any tax breaks on hybrid. Of course, we know cars like Toyota Camry, which benefited from the FAME 1, if I may say. Any expectations from the FAME 2?
Well, there is an expectation from FAME 2,
yes.
FAME
yes.
2.
Yes.
And the expectation is that the consumer must be incentivized, whatever be that incentive. Now, there is a school of thought which says that if a consumer can afford a car, why give him an incentive?
Okay.
Now, this may be quite okay in a regime where you have consumers not sensitive to price points.
Right.
But all consumers globally, at least to the limited experience that I have,
yes,
are sensitive to price points.
Okay.
Except when you consider the super luxury models, like the Lexus, for instance,
yes,
that we have.
Yes.
Now, a typical Camry consumer is sensitive by at least 15 to 20% on how we price the Camry.
Okay.
Now, this has been our experience. Now, obviously, our aim and effort is to sell as many as possible so that we lower the costs of our operation. And the fact that after the taxes went up, our volumes have dropped from 100 per month to 30 per month.
So that's a 70% decline in sales.
Yes.
So
what we did, based on what the government had done earlier, which was give the FAME incentive, encourage Make in India. They did many things, and I really think that the government had its heart in the right place, and they did all these things. So in order to support the government and to further our own business plans, we set up a Camry line.
You set up a Camry line in India? In Bangalore?
Yeah, in Bangalore, at our campus.
Yes.
Which would assemble the Camry. So obviously we spent money on that.
Yes.
We spent money on training people specially for the hybrid vehicle. And we have to deploy them across the 300 odd dealer outlets that we have across the country. I think at last count it was about 360 dealer outlets. We have spent a lot of money on apart from the supporting the dealer outlets, the marketing spend on this, in popularizing the Camry, the hybrid. Any product, however good, has to be marketed properly. So we've done all this, and in the process, we have created jobs, we have brought in more people. Suddenly, when this has happened, we find ourselves at a deep end of the pool, as it were, where we have made all these investments, we have taken in people, and suddenly the volume has collapsed.
So, sir, if I may interrupt you at this juncture, when SIAM says that policy uncertainty should not hamper, this is an example of policy uncertainty?
This is one example of policy.
Of suddenly the taxation structure making your line unviable.
That's right.
Your whole Camry line becomes unviable because of...
It is not just making the Camry line unviable.
Right.
It is the fact that for every model, whether it's hybrid or non-hybrid,
yes,
electric or non-electric,
yes,
hydrogen or non-hydrogen, we in India have to compete with, let's say, a Toyota Thailand, a Toyota Indonesia, a Toyota Philippines, or a Toyota USA. We have to compete with them to get models from Japan.
Yes.
They have to allocate a model to us.
So you mean to say when...
So they also have to support us with engineering support, services. So it's not as if, I can just ring up Japan and say, please give us this model, we'd like to sell it in India.
Mr. Viswanathan, I get a sense from you, and tell me if I'm wrong, that such policy uncertainty is hampering investments in the auto sector in India, not Toyota, but other companies also.
Certainly it is.
To that extent, you will step...
I wouldn't put it so strongly as to say that it is hampering...
Or postponing.
It is postponing.
It's postponing.
I think that's the word.
So till you get a clarity, you won't invest?
Yeah, we won't invest. And we have to rebuild our entire story once again.
Yes.
To the decision makers in Japan.
Okay.
And for them, the things that they look for before they make this is one, are the Indian regulations stable? Tomorrow, if we bring in a particular product and the Indian government hypothetically says that no, you must crash these vehicles at 64 kilometers an hour, not at 56, and let's say it's not geared for that, then can we respec the whole vehicle?
No.
You can't do that, okay?
Yes.
Now, this is the predicament most automakers find themselves in.
Yes.
I'm sure most automakers in India would want to graduate to global standards. And they can do this, but they can't do it overnight.
Yes.
So once you get a model from Japan or from US, which your parent company will allocate to you, you have to sell that model. And when you sell that model, you have to you have to make sure that your manufacturing prowess, your assembly prowess in selling these products and making these products and then selling them is flawless.
Yes.
Because you are measured against a global standard to see whether you are making defect-free vehicles.
Yes.
You're also under the scrutiny of our international partners as to whether you're making adequate profitability.
Yes.
You're also under scrutiny to see whether you have enough developed human resources. You're also under scrutiny to see whether you are having the best environment practices. So it's a combination of all of these parameters which will ultimately make the decision for us.
Yes.
In our case, it's Japan, where Japan will then say, okay, here is our operating location, and we must give them this model.
Okay.
So we have to go through all these hoops and layers just to get a model allocated. So it's not an easy process. So if there is any turbulence
in the policy,
in terms of regulatory change or policy change, it affects us.
And that is what we also saw the Society of Indian Automobile Manufacturers echoing at this whole summit. If I may say, that was the key message at the summit: policy certainty, policy certainty, policy certainty, and long-term stable policy with at least a decade's approach so that you can plan your investments. One key point that also came across in this summit was that vehicles should not be considered as a sin or as a luxury good when, in India, public transport is patchy at best, except for a few big cities. Your 2 words on that, your comment on that.
See, I think one important point that I must say, even though one of the discussion points that came out at the summit was, should you encourage private ownership of vehicles?
Yes.
My simple answer to that is, yes, you should encourage, and even though I'll be at variance or at odds with what was discussed at the summit, the manufacture of an internal combustion engine vehicle generates employment.
Yes.
In a country like India, you cannot afford to not generate jobs. Now, you may say that there are better things to do than generate jobs through the automobile sector.
Yes.
I would submit that the automobile sector is a big generator of jobs.
Yes.
And unless you can find alternate jobs for these people, don't kill the goose.
Don't kill the goose. That's the message from Mr. Viswanathan. where he says, don't kill the goose. He represents a sector which is the largest employment provider in the country by large. We expect to speak to him, to be given an opportunity to interview him after the FAME 2 is released and see his reactions. Mr. Viswanathan, I would like to thank you for sparing your time for today's episode of Policy and Politics, and looking forward to interview when FAME 2 is launched. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.